Why do you care how I got to the solution as long as I got to the solution? And this is going to be this tension throughout of, okay, our managers just now harassing every employee about documentation and it's just never getting done. How do you create incentive structures and leadership to enforce documentation?
Yeah, at
Yeah.
least in my world, the software world, most programmers really despise documentation. Maybe I would say open source guys tend to be better. It's one of those things where you just have to suffer 1,000 paper cuts and you go like, you know what, I should document this stuff.
Welcome to Practical AI, everybody. My name is Jeff, and we have a special program today. I'm here with Peter Lynn, of course, and then David Paparelli, who is a CEO with a small company. David, welcome. Thank you for being here. Tell us first just a little bit about your company and what you guys do. It's super interesting.
Yeah, so we work with, thanks for having me, Jeff and Peter. Good to be with you guys, first off. M-Cultivo is the name of our company, and we do two things for coffee producers. So we do pre-export financing for coffee producers. So that's helping them with cash flow during harvest effectively. Harvesting coffee is very cash intensive. We make sure that they have the money to get the fruit off the trees and process it for export, right? The other side of our company is a commerce platform where we run the largest auction provider in the specialty coffee industry. So this is differentiated coffee. These are exceptional coffees, high-end whiskeys, high-end wines, high-end art. Those are the kind of auctions we run for coffee. And the goals of those is just connect producers with better markets and better buyers.
Good. And the reason why we want to have you on, and we really appreciate you doing this, is because you have been doing agentic AI probably as long as I've known people doing true agentic stuff. You, I think almost a year ago, started the process of kind of replacing your marketing department with an agentic universe. And now you've got departments and people that, especially with the co-work thing or the Claude co-work thing, has come out and people are kind of experimenting more and more with agents. And so you're seeing this. And what we love about this discussion is that this comes with trade-offs and sometimes failures. And you've been kind of open about the issues that you're kind of running into. And I think people would love to kind of hear, okay, what's the dark side of this? And what do people have to be aware of? So if you don't mind, we'd love to just have that conversation. And Peter's hopefully going to be able to offer his consenting and like opinions on what he's seen that's consistent with this, but also what's the remedy? What's the remedy for these things that people are running into? So tell us, like you said, you have three things that are kind of key. Let's just start from the beginning. What's recently been something that's either annoyed you or has kind of failed at the agentic level?
Yeah, I think preface the conversation a little bit with there is no world where I would consider us having successfully implemented agentic AI in our company. The main reason why we went down this path as a company is because there's a lot of noise around AI, and I wanted to spend a little bit of money, time, resources to figure out if there was a practical application for our company with agentic AI. And I would say, for the better part of last year, there really wasn't. Most of our company was just sort of using AI from a functional perspective as a Google replacement. I ask it a question and it gives me an answer, right? And at some point in the last maybe 6 months, as we were kind of, tinkering with N8N and agentic AI solutions and Claude co-work and these kinds of things, it started to look more like a support aid in the company than Google alone. And this is where all these new opportunities, all these new problems arise. So a big one became from a relationship perspective. We have all these sales agents and business development folks all over the world, and they speak various different languages, and they're trying to manage all these complicated relationships and scenarios in the financing business we run and in the e-commerce business we run. Naturally, outsourcing that to AI makes sense. Right? I'm speaking in Spanish. I need to communicate in English. I'll write it in Spanish. I'll run it through an AI filter. It'll produce my response and it'll kind of come out. The problem with this is you're outsourcing humanity. You're outsourcing the human element of business that manages a relationship. That's something that the people on this call might be very good at. AI might be very, very bad at. And even worse is AI is not really at the point where you can still differentiate between AI and not AI responses. So if I'm reading this, if I'm, in a negotiation with an employee around compensation. If I'm reading an email and it reads very AI, right? AI generated this clearly, it was a copy and paste into this. I start getting frustrated that I'm negotiating with AI. I'm negotiating with Gemini or Claude, and I'm not negotiating with a human being. The relationship is no longer about trust and managing those expectations. It's about just reaching an end result, which is really not what we want on a team basis. We want that trust. We want to come out of these conversations with a stronger relationship and more trust involved. And that's now just been completely disintegrated. So that's a enormous annoyance and a problem. And we certainly, if that's happening internally, we can't have that filter out externally to our clients. Because as soon as our clients are aware of that, unfortunately, we make purchasing decisions. A lot of people just buy stuff because I like Peter, I like Jeff. You got to be liked. It's good to be liked if you're a sales guy, right? And so we need to keep that human element in there. You can't outsource that element to AI. And that's something that is making me very nervous as a small team with our niche market and client base.
Yeah, I mean that's a pretty common problem now, especially with the whole Microsoft suite, right? Where Outlook has Copilot, your Excel, your PowerPoint, everything has Copilot now, right? They've slapped Copilot onto everything, and it's recommending stuff for you all the time now, right? Like even in your PowerPoint will read like AI because they've slapped it on everything, and so now everything looks the same, right? There's no voice anymore. It all reads like GPT. Right. And even on LinkedIn, this was like last year, someone at Microsoft wrote a blog that was factually inaccurate, that was probably generated by GPT, and they posted it up there, and immediately people are like shredded him. They're like, you're just wrong. And so like the tool is great, but you still need the human part of like, I need to read this and make sure it's correct and it's valid and fits my voice. But
Yeah,
people get lazy.
there seems to be, and I heard this recently and I thought it was brilliant, is we need some sort of emblem like, we were a B Corp for a while and you put B Corp on your bag of coffee, right? Or you put fair trade certification on your bag of coffee. Is this idea of, hey, we need some emblem or certification that this is not AI.
Yeah.
This is a real person that wrote this. And I'm sort of like, maybe I don't know how you audit that and what that becomes, but it's almost like you need a certification to tell you that. And the way that they've implemented this in Google, at least, I don't know about Microsoft Suite, but in Workspace, it's kind of sneaky because they highlight the things in your email or whatever you're writing as before. Those kind of red
Yeah.
highlights for Word docs and things. You used to right click on it and get the right spelling. It trains you to be obsessive about correcting your spelling because, my God, if you had a lot of red highlights in there, you're going to lose your mind, right? It's AI is doing that, but for entire paragraphs, entire sentences. You click on it, and it's like, there's really a better way to phrase this. And it's sort of an opinion. I don't think that's a better way to phrase it oftentimes, but I feel I have this impulse to use it because it must be right. It was correcting my spelling. Now it's correcting how I express myself.
Yes.
That seems to be a very sneaky integration that I would like removed probably.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're not alone. A lot of people complain that you can't turn these things off. And like, I believe some places you can turn it off, but they've hidden that off button so far deep that like you have to go 12 layers in just to turn it off.
Well, the other the other thing, David, that you mentioned, which I think is super true, and that is that there's a trickle up. There's a cost, right? That now you have to deal with this as the person who's reading this, and you have to try to figure out like, am I dealing with AI right now, and why is he doing this to me, his boss, or his manager, or whatever it is? And that's a frustration, and that costs the business. Next one, David. So you said fail points. You've got fail points in your business now because you have gone agentic. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just on that trickle up one, just to close out, I the example you brought up, Peter, about the blog is 100% correct. But if you're running a business and trying to make very strategic decisions, it's one thing for it to be a blog entry and people rip you apart. I mean, that's not good publicity, right? And then people, your excuse is what? I just published an AI thing. Sorry. Like, that's not great. But from an internal perspective, if you start getting information that's inaccurate, or you're having to weed through and find the inaccuracies as a person and audit the work that the AI did, because the AI is not very good at this stuff, that is a tremendous cost. I mean, that's a horrible situation that we need to sort of avoid at all costs. But you're talking about, Jeff, on the this is a huge opportunity. So we have a small company. We've got about, 15 to 20 full-time employees, right? Those 15 to 20 full-time employees with AI can maybe do the work of 40 to 50 full-time employees, right? Well, that means they're kind of managing these departments on their own, siloed, and then they have these AI agents or AI assistants that build up their team. I don't need to hire a financial analyst anymore or a legal expert I can just use AI to do those jobs for me and then I kind of run that little AI team, right? Well, that's really good. I mean, that's an amazing opportunity for the company. The problem is what happens if you have to let that guy go? What happens if you have to take the knowledge that that guy's built up at a team level and translate that to another team? There's these scenarios where if something goes wrong, you've amplified the problem. You no longer have the processes that you would normally have from a team being managed by a good manager who would document those processes and then hand those off. And you would take that as intellectual property potentially for the company, certainly something of value. And that person leaves, you bring another team member, you promote them into that role, or you hire someone else in, and then they kind of have that whole thing documented and they have the whole team in place and it's ready to go. Now that person leaves and you're building that whole department from scratch. It's like you chopped off your whole arm and you got to figure out how to function without that. And that, again, huge opportunity, but amplifies this issue that a small company, small to medium sized company may not normally have to deal with. A startup with 2 employees has to deal with it. You don't want one of the employees to leave. But once you get to this other stage, you're sort of compiling or compounding risk as you try and build a functional team.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's moving fast enough where you really want to start building libraries and skills in like cloud cowork or I think Google's is anti-gravity and Microsoft has their own thing. So like you want to start building these things so that as your employee builds things, they're built at the same place. You can reuse it and then it's documented. And the nice thing about AI is you can tell it to document these skills for you. And it's actually pretty good at summarizing these skills so that next person you onboard can read that documentation and know, okay, these are the skills this person used to do their job. Yeah, but we're
Do you
not
think
there yet.
do you think we're at that point where um we understand what is going on enough in these to start documenting and start coming up with processes as kind of I don't even know if you'd say the average business, but say that businesses they're progressively using AI. Have we kind of figured this out? And then as the progression of the technology slowed enough to where the documentation would be relevant in the next 3 to 6 months? Or is it just a waste of time at this point and we need to wait for things to settle?
I think right now it's moving way too fast, but at the same time, you can't just not deal with it, right? Because your team is using these tools. So if you don't do anything, it's just going to get worse, unfortunately. So you start putting in, like practices in place, like, okay, if you use this tool, make a reusable skill out of it. If you make a reusable skill out of it, make sure you run this prompt and document it. So if you just put in some basic practices for like, this is how you should use AI today, you at least have things looking more similar so that as people come and go, you have the resources there, you have the libraries, you have the prompts, you have all the stuff that they've built, and you're not starting from scratch every time. Whereas if you don't have that, then people will do whatever they want.
Yeah. And I think there's training that happens within that, like natural, how do you encourage team members to think differently about these things? And what I started thinking through, because I do think you're right, is even if we produce these SOPs or processes and start mapping this, documenting it, whatever it may be, at least you will have gotten employees to start being system thinkers instead of task oriented thinkers. I do this task. If I do this task, check it off. Now I have to think of all the tasks, not just as a project manager, but at a systems level. And that's a humongous change. I mean, I would say the majority of the working population never had to be systems thinkers before.
Yeah.
And now you have to sort of say, this is a new world we're entering into. We're going to have to train people how to think about a holistic system as if they're building an ERP solution or building, but that's a, it's a tremendous challenge. And so I agree with you, but I would hope it would be valuable in the future. But at the very least, maybe the person that went through that process will have learned how to think through entire systems instead of just think through an individual task that needs to be executed.
Yeah, and I think it spans more than just your industry because even in the programming world, most managers are constantly harassing programmers to document their code because usually it's like you've got requirements coming and they're changing and you're like, okay, I just got to get this stuff done. But at the same time, you don't have a moment to breathe to document what you've actually written, and you can't document all the changes that came down the pipeline to make it what it is today. And so junior developers, young developers usually are overwhelmed. And so like they go through 6 months of hell, they produce something, and then you ask them like, so how did you get here? They're like, I don't know. And then you ask them to document. They're like, I don't know where to start.
Yeah. It's an interesting problem, and like it may be something to think through leading these organizations is just what are the incentives to produce this documentation. So as a developer, I'm guessing they get, if you had a rockstar developer that made an amazing feature and launched that and that feature shipped and is in use now and it's flawless, are you going to fire the guy because he didn't document how to do it, right?
Exactly.
And so the incentive structure around this of how do you incentivize your team to document these things when really you're going to run into the same problem the developer did, which all I really care about as a team member is output. Why do you care how I got to the solution as long as I got to the solution? And this is going to be this tension throughout of, okay, our managers just now harassing every employee about documentation and it's just never getting done. How do you create incentive structures and leadership to enforce documentation? There might be something to learn from the guys that have done it well that you're talking about.
Yeah, at least in my world, the software world, most programmers really despise documentation. Maybe I would say open source guys tend to be better because every single day you write software, you release it, someone complains like, hey, your software sucks or your software broke or like, how do I install this thing? And so after like the 10,000th time someone asks you, okay, I'm just going to document this so I have to answer the same question again. So it's one of those things where you just have to suffer 1,000 paper cuts and you go like, you know what, I should document this stuff, right?
David,
Yeah.
David, I wanted to get to number 3, but I would say that it's interesting in that discussion that you and Peter are having. It's almost like you could identify a problem that's going to exist, and that is most companies when they start with people that have a bunch of stuff in their head, and the founders, and so they're both kind of in unicorn status if they're any good. As a company grows, you may acquire a couple more unicorns, but eventually you start. A salesperson is kind of a salesperson. You have good salespeople and bad salespeople. Finance people are finance people. Accounting people are accounting. You know what I mean? You end up with these common roles that exist inside companies. When someone leaves, you at least are in the zone of, well, yeah, I'm going to hire a salesperson because I had a salesperson leave. Where we're probably headed a little bit is everybody becoming a potential unicorn. And that's super hard to manage a business where he's not just my sales guy, he's also doing the marketing and all the brand agents that are out there, and he's running our, blog. And you can just imagine a scenario where all of a sudden you've got 15 employees, but every single one is a unicorn. That's super hard to manage.
Well, horrendous. But, you try and draw from, history doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes sort of thing, right? We're trying to draw from past experiences that we've had with these giant leaps of saying, okay, I no longer have a guy figuring out all my lead gen and all my dashboards around sales and pipeline. All this. I have Salesforce or I have HubSpot, right? And these things come in and they can kind of do a bunch of this stuff in the background. You wonder if this brings this to individual people and problems. Okay, do I need to hire a team of sales guys, or do I just have one fractional sales guy that has a really amazing AI system set up, and it's just kind of this union or merge of person and technology, and then that becomes that starts looking more like a SaaS offering. I'm going to pay a monthly basis for a rock star marketing person who's managing 5 other companies' marketing departments and my marketing department that's leveraging AI agents to figure this whole thing out, which is basically their technology infrastructure and offering. And then I'm gonna pay a monthly for that. I'm not gonna hire a marketing team anymore, right? But what you're saying, Jeff, is another scenario, and that's kind of what we're living through, right? On ours, I don't think the world has been built out yet to what I just laid out. But what we're doing is everybody's got to be a rock star. Everybody's got to be able to wear 4 different hats. Why? Because the 4 different hats is only 10 to 25% of the role now because they're super efficient with all these AI agents that we're working with. And you're right. I mean, you could build 2 different organizations and both might be successful, but that rock star kind of thing of, hey, I'm going to have 5 amazing people is a really hard thing to do. And then if you do experience turnover, it could tank the entire company. You could just be completely done. So super risky.